Imagine waking up tomorrow and the most powerful empire in human history is just gone. No warning, no explanation, just silence. This is not a movie, folks. This actually happened. Rome didn't just fall slowly and it didn't just fade. It vanished into the mist and mud of a distant island in a way that honestly still confuses historians today. Welcome to This Explainer, where we're diving into something the history books don't always fully capture. What actually happens when an unstoppable empire simply disappears? Well, let's get into it. So what really happens when the greatest, most ruthless machine of the ancient world hits the very edge of the known map? We're talking about the intense, messy friction between Rome's arrogant imperial ambition, this idea that they were this unstoppable force of order and destiny, and the stubborn, wet, and totally unforgiving reality of ancient Britain. Spoiler alert, it was not a clean conquest. At all. It was a massive clash of two completely different worlds. On one hand, you have the imperial myth. When Julius Caesar first probed Britain way back in 55 BC, his written accounts were basically brilliant PR. He wrote these polished tales of glorious destiny and unstoppable Roman order. But the reality on the ground, completely different. Picture heavily armored Roman legionaries practically falling off transport ships into the freezing surf, slipping in the mud, while terrifying British chariots are literally racing down the beach right at them. It was chaotic, it was freezing, and it was deeply terrifying. Rome met the Iron Age, and the Iron Age absolutely fought back. Now, to really wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this occupation, we have to remember this wasn't just a brief weekend visit. We're looking at a timeline that spans centuries. From Caesar's first little probe in 55 BC to Emperor Claudius's full-scale invasion in 43 AD, the horrifying rebellion of Boudica in 60 AD, the building of Hadrian's Wall in 122 AD, all the way to the official Roman withdrawal in 410 AD. We are talking about nearly 500 years of possession that was violently contested at every single turn. Section 1. The Machine of Conquest, Engineering an Empire. When Emperor Claudius invaded in 43 AD, the Roman legions didn't just show up as a bunch of guys with swords. They arrived as a terrifyingly efficient society of engineers and surveyors. To them, a road wasn't just a path. It was a literal weapon of geometry used to force wild geometry into submission. First, surveyors would mark these perfectly straight lines with cold precision. Then engineers cut through the earth and dug ditches. Next, the soldiers themselves would pack in gravel to raise the surface. And finally, they'd shape a camber, a slight curve, just to drain off all that endless British rainwater. Wherever the army stopped for the night, order and infrastructure literally rose out of the mud. But you gotta ask, why go to all this exhausting trouble? Well, it all comes down to extraction. The Roman Empire had a massive, insatiable stomach. They wanted gold and silver to fill their treasuries, lead for their pipes, iron for their weapons, and just unimaginable amounts of grain and livestock to feed their massive military garrisons. This incredible wealth was essentially ripped from the earth by the forced labor of local miners working in pitch darkness and local farmers who were just crushed by heavy taxes. Rome didn't just conquer, you see. It consumed. Section 2. The Fire of Rebellion, the Wrath of Boudica. Now, conquest without any restraint inevitably breeds fire, and the local grievances against Rome were absolutely horrific. The Romans were seizing lands from client kingdoms, demanding sudden, severe taxes, and letting armed veteran colonists aggressively displace the local populations. But the match that lit the powder keg, that was the public humiliation and brutal assault of Queen Boudica of the Iceni tribe and her daughters. This wasn't just everyday cruelty, it was the ultimate unforgivable violation of a royal lineage. And it took all that local anger and turned it into a massive, explosive rebellion. The result of that rage is actually physically visible in the earth today. Archaeologists describe it as a dark seam of destruction, literally a layer of thick ash and reddened clay where timber burned incredibly fiercely. Boudica's massive army descended on major Roman settlements like Londinium, which is modern-day London. The burning of these cities was so intense that this red and black ash layer still sits right beneath modern streets. It is this haunting, tangible record of human terror from a rebellion that very nearly broke Roman rule entirely, before it was eventually crushed by sheer, unyielding Roman military discipline. Section 3. Layered Lives and Gods, Blending Two Worlds. After all that fire and punishment, Britain didn't just magically become 100% Roman. Instead, it turned into this strange, layered society where ancient indigenous memories lived right underneath Roman tiled roofs. A perfect example is the sacred hot springs at Bath. They essentially merged the local British water goddess Sulis with the Roman goddess of wisdom and war, Minerva, creating Sulis Minerva. And it wasn't just the rich elites mixing cultures. Ordinary, everyday people would throw these little lead curse tablets into the water. And they weren't asking the gods for grand imperial victories. They were asking them to settle super petty disputes. Stuff like, hey, someone stole my cloak, please curse them, or complaining about unpaid debts and local gossip. It really shows you exactly how deeply intertwined these two completely different worlds actually became. Section 4. The limits of empire. Stone versus rain. But eventually, even the great Roman machine had to stop. Up in the harsh northern edge of the province, the empire finally realized it just couldn't conquer the shifting mists and those fiercely independent northern tribes. They were literally forced to stop and build a border. This struggle led to one of the most haunting indictments of imperial conquest ever written, recorded by the historian Tacitus and attributed to a northern leader named Calgacus. They create desolation and call it peace. Rome could win battles up north, sure. They could march in and burn things down, but they couldn't hold the land. The wild geography and the stubborn resistance fundamentally humbled the greatest military on earth. Which, of course, led to this incredible structure, Hadrian's Wall. Now, we often think of it as just a big defensive fence to keep people out, but it was actually so much more than that. It was a massive architectural filter. With its continuous stone barrier, mile castles, watchtowers, and large forts, it was designed to actively inspect, delay, and heavily tax any movement at the very edge of the known world. It was basically the empire trying to physically carve its authority right into the wild landscape. But who was actually guarding this edge? Well, the Vindolanda tablets bring this wall to life in a way that grand stone monuments just can't. These are fragile little wooden scraps that basically reveal the ordinary beating heart of frontier life. They aren't some grand, dramatic military histories. No, they are ordinary soldiers writing home, asking their families to send more socks because it's freezing. They're women sending out birthday party invitations. It's the mundane reality of endless frontier paperwork. It reminds us that this terrifying empire was maintained by clerks, cooks, and daily routines just as much as it was by cavalry. Section 5. The Long Fade. How an Empire Vanishes. So how does it all end? Well, Rome didn't break because of a single enemy, and it didn't fall overnight in some spectacular cinematic battle. It broke from within. It faded through the slow, agonizing loss of confidence and internal collapse. At the imperial height, you had a regular coin supply, thriving stone villas, and unified legions. But jump to the fading years of the 3rd and 4th centuries, and the economy is literally collapsing. Coins lose their value. Trade grinds to a halt. Terrified people are burying their family's silver in the yard. Usurper emperors are popping up and minting their own rogue money, while coastal watchmen constantly scan the sea for raiders. The leadership in Rome was collapsing, changing hands constantly, and fear simply became the new normal. And then we hit this number, 410. In the year 410 AD, the Emperor Honorius sent a letter to the British cities basically telling them, look to your own defense. The Roman legions didn't all march away in one dramatic, sad parade. The imperial voice simply grew faint, the administration fell apart, and official protection ended. Order just disappeared. And the archaeological evidence of this withdrawal is absolutely staggering. First off, the fresh imperial coin supply ceases entirely. Literally, the money just stops arriving. Second, grand public bathhouses decay and get repurposed into barns or workshops. Third, those incredible underfloor heated elite villas just abandoned to the elements and the weeds. And fourth, power shifts completely. It becomes highly local, constantly negotiated, and incredibly fragile. This massive continent-spanning system just splintered into localized isolation. Ultimately, time is the final emperor. Roman Britain didn't disappear into thin air. It was absorbed back into the mud. Its laws, its architecture, its massive systems all faded out, leaving behind only these ghost lines of ancient roads and broken walls buried deep beneath the modern cities of Europe today. We literally walk right on top of the ruins of their reality. Which leaves us with one final, very provocative question. If the greatest machine of the ancient world could simply vanish, is any empire truly permanent? Look around at our own modern world, our systems of digital currency, our massive highways, our global laws. If history repeats itself, what comes next?
Rome may have fallen, but its influence never truly disappeared. It serves as a permanent warning, hidden just beneath our feet. Subscribe for more untold history stories that textbooks never explain. And thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the history beneath you.